Today we're covering sorting and uploading on Mediacloud. The goal here is to avoid handing off footage to future projects that might make it difficult to reuse. And we're going to do that at the archival state. The key decision here is to, do we keep everything, or do we sort through and keep only the most usable takes? Of course, depending on the project that you're working on and the footage that you're archiving, the answer might be different, but that's what we hope to address today. So let's take a look at DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere Pro, and Adobe Lightroom to see how we can prep our footage prior to upload. So here we are in DaVinci Resolve, and you'll see that on the left of my timeline, these are all clips that I'd like to recycle. The clips on the right are the ones that are the rejects that won't be getting archived. When it comes to color, we've applied a base grade so that future editors can apply a more destructive grade to this if needed. When it comes to audio, you'll see these clips don't have audio, but if your clips do, the question to ask is, do I want to keep the audio for this? If the audio adds to the usability of the clip, then of course you should keep it. Otherwise, in the encoding phase, you can always tick off the audio. If this footage were 60 frames a second, or let's say 120 frames a second, there's no point in rendering it in 24. Why waste those extra frames? It allows future editors to also slow down that footage. So if this were 60, we would make sure that the timeline was in 60 frames a second as well. So an important note about sorting here, you'll see at the top left, I've organized the footage into 4 different timelines, and each of those timelines is labeled under the scene that we're looking at. And really the only reason for that is so that when we're looking at this footage in a year from now, if we're looking for something specific, we know exactly which file to go look at. So here we are in the Deliver tab of DaVinci. And as we're exporting, the main thing to keep in mind is the codecs. So of course, uncompressed footage, like in Apple ProRes, either 422 or 444, uncompressed footage would be ideal for some use cases, like for example, if you've got green screen footage and you'd like to retain every bit of detail possible. However, for most footage, ProRes might be overkill. And so a good compromise there would be to render in MP4 with H.264. This is a standard format that's been used across most platforms that you would view videos on. Of course, the downside there is that 264 does not have a 10-bit option, at least on DaVinci Resolve. So when we turn to 265, you'll see that this option appears. Where we can render this in 10-bit, and not only that, we also have a 422 10-bit option. The last thing to remember is the bitrate. So Automatic may choose a low bitrate, which would then mean that you're not retaining as much detail in the file that you're exporting. So we'd recommend choosing the Restrict to option. It's got 30 megabits a second here, which should be enough to retain a good amount of detail across your image, but you can make it larger if you'd like. The downside being file size will increase proportionately. And that's all you need to think about before sending it off to render. And by the way, one thing about naming source files, we often see some confusion about the best ways to name the source files so that they're easiest to relink in future. What we recommend is using only letters, numbers, hyphens, and underscores, and to completely avoid special characters like the @ symbol, hashtags, and dots and commas. A clear structure could look like scene underscore client underscore location underscore date. It's a lot of things, but it allows that file to be readable by even people that weren't working on this project, because you know exactly what you're going to be looking at. And also, following these best practices means that you end up making your file compatible across all software, whether that's Mac or Windows. So here we are in Adobe Premiere Pro. Exporting options are slightly different or presented differently. Under Format, at the top, we'll choose H.265. And then if we scroll down slightly, we'll see here that under Profile, this might not be a selectable option, so we'll check off that box. And then rather than main, we'll choose main 10. And what that does is we're now rendering in 10-bit. Under tier, we'll go from main to high. And what that is doing is switching to a higher bit rate. Depending on your hardware, you might see some different options on this page, and you can customize them to your liking based on what makes sense for your project, and there's 1,000 YouTube tutorials to help you figure out what each of those are. But from our perspective, those two options get you to a good place when it comes to retaining the maximum amount of information that allows for the maximum amount of flexibility for future editing. So when it comes to still images, the same core principles apply as with video. So if we click on our info tab, you'll see the metadata that comes with this photograph. If we do this right, this will export to the JPEG or TIFF that we export, and therefore will transfer over to Mediacloud as well. And of course, we'll be trying to retain the maximum resolution that this file has come with. So regarding the grading, we've applied a very basic grade here, as you'll see. And the intention is the same as with video. We just want a clean image that can go through a lot more creative processing in future when this is used again. So when we're ready to export, we'll go into that export tab. We're exporting 5 files here, and you'll see up top here in the image type, of course, there's many options. For Mediacloud, what works is JPEG, TIFF, and PNG. Those are those top 3 options. And as we said earlier, we want to retain the full dimensions that the picture came with. So we'll choose full size, and we'll also choose 100% quality. That ensures that we get the highest quality. One important thing to note here, this may already be clicked, but in case all metadata is not clicked, you do want to include that, just so the metadata that we talked about before gets exported with the file. Everything looks fine here, so I'm going to hit export. Next up, let's look at how to upload files to Mediacloud. So we'll go to the top to the upload footage button. And before we can upload, we need to put in some of these details. The first one being date of filming. Let's say we shot this last month. Well, let's choose the 23rd of February. We'll need to choose a folder. We can either make a new folder, or we can choose from an existing one. With batch tagging, these are all tags here that are going to be applied to each file. This is an easy way to tag all of our files with certain common tags. So perhaps the name of the photographer, the name of the production company, any internal notes that you might have. And under the tag section, we have some pre-existing tags that you could select as well. And now we're ready to drag and drop our files. So over here, you'll see this is a set of files that's a mixture of MP4s and JPEGs. For the purposes of uploading, you can have a variety of combinations, and it should not matter. For thumbnails, photographs will immediately have a thumbnail, but videos will only have a thumbnail once the transferring is complete. So if this all on the left looks good to you, and if all the files here look good as well, we can click the Start Upload button. One important thing to note here is that the files will need to transfer, but once it says that they're encoding, you're safe to close the tab. Those files are then safe. And that concludes our demo for sorting and uploading to Mediacloud. Thanks for watching.